Alright. Hello, my name is Anil Butler. I hope you can all hear me. I'm a sophomore debater at Michigan State, and I first want to take the opportunity to echo Sean and thank the organizers of this event, particularly Sean and Carly, for giving the MSU debaters this opportunity and for giving all of us an opportunity basically to expand our knowledge of solar and wind power. And congratulations to all of the middle school debaters for a very successful term. Now, the debate. The world faces an undeniable crisis. We have reached an energy breakpoint where current reliance on fossil fuels has left us with very few options. Oil will soon disappear, and hallmarks of biodiversity and our environment may reach the very same fate. As warming escalates, polar caps are melting and forcing sea levels to rise, and species are becoming more endangered and extinct. You can't just plant some trees and wish away warming. Real solutions must be presented. However, all hope is not lost. Solar and wind power can be effective tools in fighting for a sustainable future. We affirm the notion that the U.S. should take more aggressive steps to promote solar and wind energy. In particular, space-based solar power and wind off of our coasts could provide massive benefits. For space-based solar power, construction would be simple, as you would just need to attach a solar panel to the satellite. These methods have worked in the past and can work in the future with new, aggressive government incentives. These two types of solar and wind energy answer the most basic problems with renewable energy. What happens when the sun doesn't shine or when the wind doesn't blow? Solar panels in space can access the sun's rays, because the sun always shines in space, and offshore areas are known to have more wind. To be clear, generic arguments about solar or wind power do not apply. These types of solar and wind can create specific and concrete ways to face global challenges. But let's take a step back first and evaluate the main benefits of both. The first benefit that solar and wind power can provide is a way to revitalize our economy. As the economy bounces back from a double-dip recession, we are teetering on the edge of a cliff. We must make smart choices and avoid short-term collapse while ensuring prominence in the international political economy for years to come. June Ekins, who is a physics lecturer at the University of Sydney, Australia, argues that solar may be the only way that we can reduce dependence on oil when she says, solar remains an attractive way of mitigating climate change and helping our economy. Solar power can displace conventional power generation and contribute towards a truly sustainable energy supply. There are already massive benefits for solar and wind power in the status quo, but the technology has not fully reached a point where it can serve as a standalone basis, independent of fossil fuels. In order for this to occur, the government must aggressively incentivize companies to develop solar and wind power. There can be no downsides to this approach. Solar panels and wind turbines exist now, and we know that any harm they cause are massively outweighed by the enormous benefits to the economy. Any money we spend now we can make back in the future by fostering an economic system that isn't choked to death by depleting oil and rising fossil fuel prices. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, we need a way to curb global warming. Dana Nuccelli suggests that we know warming is real. Satellites measured energy imbalance, glaciers, sea ice, and ice sheets are all receding. Sea levels are rising. Spring is arriving sooner. There's no doubt. The 2000s were hotter than the 90s, which were hotter than the 80s, which were hotter than the 70s. 2010 tied for the hottest year on record. The only way that we can reverse these trends is through renewable energy. Warming is so problematic that unless we have solutions like solar and wind, we will not be able to catch up. To reiterate, we need a solution. The negative will not provide you with one. The only concrete policy action this government can take is to aggressively incentivize companies to develop space-based solar power and wind offshore. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Tyler Thur and I'm a freshman, also a debater at Michigan State University. Before starting, I wanted to encourage everyone to stick with public speaking and debate and to keep showing up. It was a great surprise on my Saturday morning to see so many participants here. Everyone should be really proud of that. From an adult point of view, debate has helped me transition to college, make friends, and do better in school. But from a youth point of view, it's simply fun and something I want to participate in. So I think everyone should congratulate themselves and make sure that they stay really committed to this activity because it means a lot. That aside, I'm ready to offer my refutation. Okay. We acknowledge that the prop team has a solid group of arguments why they should win the debate. That being said, we believe their approach is short-sighted. They have not thought about all of the consequences of their action. To prove this, we will attack the prop in 3 ways. 1, we will prove an unintended consequence of increasing solar and wind. 2, we will prove another way to solve their problems. And 3, we will prove that their solution simply does not work. Our first argument is the unintended consequence. The main idea of our argument is that we have to be careful with how much money we spend. The prop team saying we should develop solar and wind is like when I borrowed my parents' credit card. It was all fun and games until the bill came. First, it's important to note that the economy is getting better. An article from the Associated Press indicates a measure of U.S. economic health over the next 6 months increased in February from January, a sign that growth can be improving. This is the best evidence because it cites the Treasury and indicates economic factors that prove the economy is for sure getting better. That the only thing that can make it worse is spending as much money as space-based solar power or offshore wind would. Now, second is our evidence that the plan costs a lot of money and would be dangerous for the economy. The Heritage Foundation calls it another Solyndra waiting to happen. For those of you who do not know, Solyndra was a corporation that when funded and given the government support that they isolate, was detrimental on the economy because the loans were unsuccessful and it increased electricity prices and caused more harm to the economy than actually gave. The same article from the Heritage Foundation indicates that it would produce above market costs ranging from $438 million to $513 million. It also indicates that it would raise electricity prices, which every single consumer has to bear, by 13.5%. That's 2 reasons then it would hurt the economy, and reasons why their short-sighted approach to fixing oil dependence is simply not enough. Beyond that, their technology of space-based solar power also hurts the economy. This is proven mathematically by Professor Kevin Chow when he says, as evidence, the SPS system is extremely expensive, and the benefits, not evident at first glance, the costs seem to far outweigh the benefits in terms of cost and implementation. Now is our impacts. We think that economic growth and low electricity prices is the most important thing for the judge to protect in this debate. First off, it's pretty clear that electricity prices are important to domestic U.S. manufacturing and U.S. industry, that the only way the economy can function and the only way that people can have jobs is if overhead costs for corporations are low enough to stay in the United States. Our second argument is that the economic growth that would be stunted if the government were to spend large sums of capital is more important than their plan because that sort of government money can go towards things like social service projects, or can go to things like building roads and protecting natural forests, and addressing the same sort of biodiversity loss and oil depletion that they articulate. Our second way we want to engage the prop case is to discuss another way that we could be able to solve for their advocacy. We think that the United States federal government should increase tree planting. We know. They made a joke that you can't just plant the trees and wish away global warming, but this is a tangible solution that Arnold Nader, who is a mathematical engineer and an urban planner, indicates is possible. He states, trees and other vegetation convert CO2 to oxygen and store carbon and living matter in wood projects and in the soil. Through these processes, almost a quarter of CO2 emissions globally from fossil fuel and cement production are removed from the atmosphere. This also doesn't trigger our disadvantage. In other words, we're able to avoid all of our economy arguments because planting trees is a lot less expensive and a lot more feasible than these long, creative, but infeasible solutions that the affirmative introduces. Finally, I want to talk about their arguments. They're not going to be able to prove that their technology is possible. Space-based solar power, according to Professor Day, who is an extremely qualified member of the Space Studies Science Board of the National Resource Council, indicates it has a laundry list of problems, including that it would require thousands of rocket launches, would require new technology to be built, that it's extremely expensive, and that no agency within the government, like the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy, is willing to undertake it. In evidence from A Smarter Grid, also uses an example in the United Kingdom to prove that offshore wind isn't all it's count up to be. It proves that they cannot solve.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Hewer. I'm a freshman at MSU. Pretty simply, I wouldn't be here at MSU right now were it not for my experience with debate. Hope you guys enjoy. So I'd like to start by responding to the concerns that Tyler brought up in his last speech. He's certainly correct that we need to take into consideration the economics of the situation. But the fact is, relying on fossil fuels is not an economically sustainable path of action by any means whatsoever. We are going to lose the energy resources that we have. They are finite and limited, and they are not capable of meeting the growing demand. Our energy demand, on its current path, by the year 2050, we will not be able to meet our projected demands. Peter Schubert, PhD, indicated in his art in an Ohio University publication that the energy demand will almost double by 2030, the global energy demand. We do not have the resources currently in place in order to meet the demand. We need to look for drastic new increased sources of energy, and wind and solar can provide the solution, especially solar energy from space. Once we get panels out there that can be receiving energy constantly, they will enable us to meet the energy demand that is going to be driving our economy into the future. Also, by framing it as an issue of initial expenditure, Tyler is missing the point because it is an investment. We will be making money off of these energy sources in the long term. It is not just a spending money that does not recoup its investment. He lists Solyndra as an example, which is not a comparable example by any means. That is a failed energy system that we are not looking at. Anelia stated quite clearly from the beginning that we are looking at solar energy from space as a more effective solution to solar energy on the ground. Secondly, if planting trees to solve global warming sounds too good to be true, that's because it is. Peter Biedlau et al. Posted about carbon sequestration in forests, and indicates that there are a lot of external variables, such as nitrogen concentration in soil, that limit how much carbon can be sequestered in trees. Furthermore, trees are not even the most effective long-term source of carbon sequestration. Oceans hold much more carbon for longer term than trees do. Planting trees is not a practical method of preventing global warming from occurring. And even if trees could sequester some of the carbon, or significant amounts of it, it's simply rising too fast for us to be able to deal with planting trees fast enough to contain all of the carbon that's being increased. Finally, he indicates that space-based solar panels are impossible to function or ineffective. However, Dr. Feng Su, in his article Harnessing the Sun, looked into solar panels in space and indicated that with a good initial investment, with a government-subsidized effort to deal with the launch costs and help put the infrastructure in place, this can become a sustainable industry where it is economically advantageous and feasible for us to receive our energy from space. Even if Tyler is correct that it's not the most efficient energy source, or that it would require a significant investment, the fact is the costs of not doing so are too great. Even though it may have some economic disadvantages, even if energy prices increase slightly, if we don't, we're going to deal with biodiversity loss and rising oceans, where a significant portion of Florida, New York City are underwater. Imagine the economic consequences that would have. Or just the consequences on the people's lives who are in those areas. Global warming has the potential to drastically decrease both the quality of life and just the number of humans and other animals that can physically be alive on Earth. It is necessary that we take the steps to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, even if it results in some minor economic disadvantages. Thank you.
Used to happen, and it would never shake it.
Hi everyone, I'm Kavya. I am a junior at Michigan State, and I really want to thank both Curly and Sean for running this, and I really want to thank all of you for taking your time, not just to come out here, but to do the kinds of preparation for this event that I was really impressed with today. I saw all of you demonstrate amazing content knowledge and amazing amounts of preparation, and I think that that's really meaningful, and I want you all to give yourselves a pat on the back for doing that. Quite literally a pat on the back, yes, like that. So thank you all again, and I hope that you all enjoyed yourselves today because we really enjoyed having you here. That's it, without further ado. If beaming solar energy from giant panels set up in space sounds too good to be true, that's because it is. Their technology has about as much of a chance of actually working by 2020 or 2030 as the Lions do of making the Super Bowl next year. In fairness, I don't think that they have told us how their technology could work or by when. They've made really great points about how our energy demand is going to double, about how it's going to triple, and how we won't be able to sustain ourselves with fossil fuel and reach a tipping point in the next less than a decade or so. But what they haven't told us is how their technology, which requires an amazing amount of research and development still, could possibly get us up and running, even with the kinds of initial expenditures that they're talking about. There's a reason why, even though the government has funded similar technologies in the past, none of them have quite proven themselves capable of working. It's a better idea for us in the long term to solve problems like warming or the environment to rely on technologies that we know could work in the short term. Their proposal is also not very good for the economy. First of all, offshore wind drives up electricity costs significantly for families in particular, and it requires a ton of spending on research and development until it is actually capable of doing anything to solve. Electricity prices are also bad for employment because when people have to spend more money on their home electricity, that takes away from the money that they could use their wages to spend on other things. They might have cited statistics for why their proposal is good for the economy, but I don't think that they have convincingly explained how that could outweigh the effects of a loss of employment or the debt and the deficit. Second is that SPS systems are extremely expensive. We're talking about giant solar panels that are put in space that could theoretically beam sunlight from the sun down to the earth. That takes an amazing amount of research and development spending in particular that the government doesn't quite have right now. Furthermore, I think they've underestimated the importance of the economy. It's not possible to solve the environment in the long term without short-term economic gains that their proposal would offset. For example, if families are too cash-strapped to pay for their electricity, there's not much of a likelihood that they could buy the kinds of technologies that they're proposing. If people don't have jobs, they certainly can't pay for more expensive clean technology over time, which global warming necessitates. Furthermore, the government could also spend the same money on other things, particularly quicker or more feasible types of energy that we already know worked. These don't necessarily have to be fossil fuels. They could be other types of renewable energy, but they would at least be more feasible, more quickly demonstrated types of renewable energy than the ones that the PRO team has listed. They've also cited that the effects of warming are both quality of life and quantity of people living. But economic decline is bad for both of those too. When people are poor, their standard of living and their quality of life suffers immeasurably. People die every day from poverty, from disease, and from lack of access to things that employment would give them. They made the argument in the last speech that relying on fossil fuels is unsustainable over the long term. We didn't necessarily propose only relying on fossil fuels, and we can even agree with them that fossil fuels in the long term are unsustainable. But we do think that our solutions of planting trees and spending our money more wisely on more feasible types of technology could solve their concerns while avoiding ours. They say that the initial expenditure is an investment, but have cited no examples of how that investment, or how at least the economic decline that happens now, could be outweighed by their warming concerns in the long term, too. Planting trees is also capable of solving. Our studies say that 1/4 of all global emissions, which is a significant amount of emissions, could go down if we sequester carbon with more trees. Plus, even if planting trees is insufficient to solve, we think it is at least a more practical, feasible solutions to the problems they have placed on the table than their offshore wind and SDSD solutions.
Hello. I'm Danny Kaplowitz. I'm representing the MacDonald Middle School Debate Team. I'm on the pro side of this debate, and to be frank, I do believe the Lions can make the Super Bowl. I'm going to start by rebutting and refuting some of the points that the con team made. Tyler mentioned several times the money in the economy that would go into creating these renewable sources of energy. But what I don't think that they realized was that the cost of global warming would far outweigh that. If New York City went underwater, can you imagine how much money it would take to rebuild it? And we already spend billions and billions of dollars on mining oil and natural gases. And so if we can ease away from that, we can spend that money to use these renewable and never-ending sources of energy. And they also mentioned several times that planting trees would be an effective way of siphoning carbon out of the atmosphere. But we'll still run out of oil and natural gas, even if we do plant trees. It's a short-term solution, but the long-term problem will stay the same. So now I'm going to move on to some of my own points in favor of wind and solar energy. They have a far smaller effect on our environment than the energies that we're currently using, such as natural gas, oil, and coal. They emit no greenhouse gases and are social and environmentally more friendly. If you think about it, mountaintop removal, that not only destroys many species, but also destroys the pristine landscape around us. Fossil fuels are very limited, and by the estimates of ecotricity.co.uk, it will run out by 2088. That's pretty soon, if you think about it. Solar panels produce no air pollutants or global warming, or acid rain and health problems, things that are huge problems today. They don't destroy pristine natural areas, and they can be installed fairly quickly, and they can be any size. So other than the solar panels in space, if you want to have them on the Earth, they don't have to be these enormous and land-destroying things. You can have them fairly small and still power a lot of energy. Wind energy can also help the economy, because if someone has a private wind turbine on their property that they own, a lot of times it results in lots of excess energy. And I know someone who has this, and they sell the excess energy, which would help the economy. Now, it can be used instead of or in the place of other naturally damaging processes, such as fracking and mountaintop removal, which both pollute. Well, fracking pollutes the water which we drink, and mountaintop removal destroys our environment. These things using in place of them would help us socially and environmentally. They also mentioned several times the loss of employment due to using these alternative energy methods. But if you think about it, the jobs that it would take to get these into the atmosphere or into the space and keep them powered could even help us and gain more jobs. Because in reality, it does take a lot of jobs for these processes to be successful. I'm going to go over a few of my points again and stress the most important ones. These alternative methods not only are fairly easy, like to install and to use and to harness, they don't have negative environmental impacts like greenhouse gases, acid rain, and warming that could really damage our world. They can be easily installed in some cases, and they can be any size. And they can be used instead of or in the place of damaging and harming unnatural ways of mining and getting coal and oil. I'm Danny Kaplowitz. I'm from the MacDonald Middle School Debate Team. I'm on the pro side of this argument, and with that, I rest my case.
I agree that CO2 emissions, fossil fuels, and climate change, they're all problems that we face today. Just the way that my opponents propose to solve these problems aren't precisely the best ways. Putting solar panels in space and offshore wind turbines have several distinct problems, which I will be listing later. I have 3 reasons why space-based solar, wind turbines, and why offshore wind turbines are not exactly the best way. First off, there's the cost. There's a fiscal crisis going on right now. There's a budget deficit of over $16 trillion currently, according to the U.S. Debt Clock. We're already spending money on solar and wind through a program called the Recovery Act. It's not the best way to spend our limited resources. We can't just waste our money willy-nilly in a time where our funds are so fragile. Now, people also, they don't want their taxes to be raised to help some space program that unfortunately NASA just closed down, so they'll have to reinstate it. That means even higher costs. They don't want to have to spend hundreds more dollars on something that we don't know if it's going to work or not. People are already struggling to pay their bills. Now, next off, if you did get the money for it, is it going to work? Solar and wind are not the best choices. Space-based solar and offshore wind. Others have greater potential and greater need, such as hydroelectric energy, tidal harness, and biogas.
You were stressing the economy. How are those ways cheaper than using even onshore solar and wind?
Onshore solar and wind, because those ways have a higher efficiency rate and they have a higher proof. They can function at almost any time. Now, the government's role is not to pick winners and losers. We don't want to say this is good, this is bad. We don't want to emphasize this. Again, and then, even if we are picking, space-based solar has several major problems, such as the fact that how are we going to transmit the energy from space to Earth? How are we going to get this energy from one place to another? That's going to take up a lot of time, and even then, that might take enough time. We're going to need to spend, But, sorry, I'm a little tongue-twisted. But even if space-based solar does work, we need to use oil to power the rockets, to make rocket fuel, to send all those rockets up into space with solar panels. We shouldn't have to rely on these experimental ways of generating electricity. The people should decide through private market investments. Now, finally, people need to take their own responsibility for reducing their carbon footprint. We don't want the government coming in and telling you what's what. If one time the government changed their mind, then people would just go back to their ways and nothing would change. This would just happen all over again. If the government barged in, people would fight. There's protests. our government is democratic, so the people can decide. If they don't like it, then they can get rid of it. Now, many people have agreed with me. Many influential people, such as all the sources that my team has quoted, and in fact, Professor Wolfgang Bahr, one of the main deciders of the German German electrical economy, has said that efficiency can decrease carbon emissions and save money. Isn't that the best decision? Saving money, decreasing carbon emissions. Those are two good things. Now, I wish to rebut a few more of my opponents. Danny said that offshore, that solar panels and wind turbines can be as big or small as they want. Oh, never mind. As big or small as they want. What's the point of it if nobody's going to see it? How does that matter? How does the size of it depend on its generation?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
You can't? Okay, is this good?
There we go.
Okay, so my name is Haneen Hamed. I'm on the pro side of this. Hold on a second, sorry. Okay, I'm on the pro side of this debate, and first I would like to start with rebutting some stuff the opposition side stated. And Tyler, the first speaker, he said that there's a consequence for putting solar panels up in space, and that was that the money we spent. But I would like to state that the Congressional Joint Committee on Taxation has estimated that the oil gas subsidies have cost $91 billion versus $5.9 billion for wind production. So that's basically, we spend $5.9 billion on wind and solar energy, but we spend more money on trying to dig up oil and natural gas. So there's a big decrease in money, so it would actually be saved. And he also said that by increasing trees, by planting trees, that it would help clean the air and put more oxygen into the air. But that doesn't cause an increase in non-renewable resources. We will still run out. And by the time 2088, we will run out of all non-renewable resources. And he also stated that it's not possible for the solar sun panels. And my partner Anelia stated that it has been done before and it was successful. So why not do it again? And the second con speaker, Kavya, also stated that the sun and solar panels are not work, and we're not sure if they're ever going to work. But as I said, they have worked, and why not do it again? And she said that the solar panels that are going to go out in space are very expensive. But with that money we use for digging up oil, why not use it and use it for non-renewable resources, something that will help our environment and our economy. She also said there is going to be a decrease in jobs, but by manufacturing wind turbines and solar panels, there is going to be a huge increase in jobs. She said that many people die from diseases from the contamination in the air and the chemicals that are in the air. But by using wind turbines and solar panels, that those chemicals, since we will be decreasing our amount of digging up natural gas from the ground, there is going to be a decrease in chemicals and contamination in the air and water. So there will be less deaths and diseases in people.
So my main point we have to look at the long term of this. We want to invest by putting solar panels in the space, we're going to invest money, we're going to save money, we're going to help the environment and boost the economy. And she stated that our studies are an answer to our problem. But she never stated what studies those studies could be biased. They could be biased with renewable resources. I would also like to rebut some things the third con speaker said, and he said that the problem with cost. And again, the money we use for digging up non-renewable resources, we could turn that over and use it for renewable resources, so we will be saving money. And he said that solar and wind are not the best choices, but I believe that solar and wind never run out. They're here. Why not use them? Why not take the chance and use them instead of using non-renewable resources that contaminate our waters and our air and pollute the air? And I have some points I want to state. That fossil fuel production is hazardous to the environment, but wind and solar energy production is much more safe for humans. There is no carbon dioxide, no fracking chemicals leak, or no oil spills. And also the wind and solar power production is green and renewable. And my name's Henning, and I end my case. Thank you.
I am Julian Lane, and I am on the Glencairn Debate Team, and I am against the fact that the government should substantially promote wind and solar energy, especially these newfangled schemes of space-based solar power. First off, as Ben said, with NASA stopping the shuttle program, that means we're going to have to spend a bunch of money on research and development for making the solar panels. We're going to have to spend a bunch of money getting NASA back up and running, and we're going to have to spend even more money on the supplies and materials we need to make the solar panels and rocket fuel and so on. Also, they say that we'll have space-based solar panels. Well, to get the solar panels into space, you'll need space shuttles. And what do space shuttles burn? Rocket fuel or oil, highly processed oil. So they're going on and on and on about how this will save the environment by not consuming fossil fuels. But to put this into play, they'll have to use a bunch of fossil fuels just to get it to work. And then Tyler said that you'll need thousands of rockets to be launched to get all the solar panels into orbit. And then also the efficiency of solar panels is currently only about 15%, which is a horrible efficiency out of 100%. And then we're still going to need some fossil fuels. Just while we're waiting for this to get into the air, we're still going to need a coal buffer and some oils and natural gas. There are many other ways to solve this problem other than wind and solar. You can use all sorts of other methods of renewable energy, such as hydroelectric energy, biofuels, and geothermal power. Now I'm just going to go over some of the big arguments that the con side has made and why we have won this debate. Tyler said that this plan is another Solyndra waiting to happen, which I completely agree with. Cabby said that the offshore wind electricity costs, those are going to be tremendous. And then Ben made the point that we are in a fiscal crisis here. We've got $16 trillion in budget deficits. So do we have the money that we can spend even more on a plan that is not even guaranteed to work? And then in all of that, we're just gonna have to just keep on shelling out so much money. Our budget deficit's gonna go up drastically. And then Ben also said that when we do this, we'll just the government's gonna be just picking winners and losers here. They're saying solar power, wind power, you win, fossil fuels, you lose. That is not that's not going to be worthwhile. And then, as I said before, for the space shuttles to work, you're going to need to use rocket fuel or other processed oils to get them to get off the ground. You can't make an electric space shuttle. And then, finally, a really good argument by Ben said, how are we going to transfer this energy from the solar panels down to Earth? I mean, you can't really use wires because you're going to need a really, really, really long wire to